Now let's talk with Mark Murphy, the editor of the Providence Business News. The cover story in the current edition of the newspaper has some pretty serious complaints by developers about the Providence city bureaucracy and how tough it is to get anything approved.
You know, this is actually part two of a story we did 3.5 years ago, which is, why is it so hard to develop so difficult to develop in Providence? And even though there are a lot of cranes in the city and there is a lot of building going on, a lot of the underlying issues haven't changed. And so we can go through them relatively quickly. Number one is rents in Providence are not high enough to cover the costs of building in Providence. So for instance, the cost of building in Providence compared with Boston, not that different. And those costs have been rising because they've been rising everywhere as labor goes up, as material costs go up. But the problem is because rents aren't as high, developers are not going to spend their capital, are not going to invest in a place where they can't make their money back. So what happens is the city and the state have to come in with incentive programs, which have gathered a lot of opposition, but without that you wouldn't see the kind of development that you would have.
And now your article talks about a developer who has decided, more than one developer who has decided to do some project in Providence. They got to go through this commission and that board and the Coastal Resources Management Council, which is quasi-state, not city. But they're saying, what's the holdup? Why all these delays?
Well, and that's the second part. And this is, again, something that has changed a little bit, but not quite enough. And that is the lack of transparency and consistency in regulation and overlapping jurisdictions. So the CRMC, we're talking the project there is on the east side of the Providence River in the old 195 land, and he wants to build a hotel that would be waterfront. And what's interesting is, so the CRMC regulations say essentially that he's got 10 feet deep to build, it can only be 10 feet wide away from the water because of all the setbacks, because of what they, in terms of what they want, even though the I-195 Commission has approved his 45-foot deep hotel. And so he's sort of in the process of trying to get some sort of relief from that. CRMC is not so sure that's a smart environmental issue. So you've got these overlapping regulations, and that's really one of the problems for a lot of developers in the city is they can't really, they can't get one answer. They have to get a whole lot of answers.
Yeah, even the city council president, David Salvatore, is quoted in your article as saying that reputation that Providence has of being difficult is deserved.
Yeah, it is, and again, the issue, and it's, you see it in state regulation. I mean, the governor just talked about having removed a whole lot of regulations, state regulations, but while the state has a lot of regulations, and what we're talking about here is in the city, it is the conflict and overlapping in multiple jurisdictions. So you've got to go through multiple public hearings in order to make something happen. It would be better from the developer's perspective if they don't mind regulation, just make it like a one-shot deal, right, as opposed to 3, 4, or 5.
Lots more about this in the current edition of the Providence Business News, which also has the annual giving guide on philanthropy. And Mark Murphy, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Frank.